Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 271. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, June the 11th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Well, this week I was back on the road in the southeastern United States, Georgia, South Carolina, that area. Beautiful part of the country, different part of the country. I'm going to go into detail as to how that part of the country is different than here in the Midwest. All parts of the country are a little bit different. America's a big country. It's a lot of land, a lot of different people, and things are just different. Now, before I go into that, let me tell you what today's essay is going to be all about, and I'm going to link everything together. I've done this topic countless times and always a little bit differently. And the reason I like this topic is because to me, it's about as demonstrative as you can get in the world we're living in today. Everybody has problems. Everybody has changing problems. Before the pandemic, it was you can't find good help. Then a lot of people lost their jobs. Then the government bailed them out. Then the people were slow to come back to work. Now people are back to work, and we have an out of control inflation. Gasoline prices here in the Midwestern U.S., where they're normally quite cheap, $4.89 a gallon. That's unbelievably bad. Is it Joe Biden's fault? No. Could he be doing a whole lot more to help the situation? Absolutely. But gas prices are high everywhere. We have problems everywhere. Everybody in the world has problems. However, I would say most of the people listening to this podcast, in fact, I would say probably about 94% of them, because about 6% of my audience comes from India and other places in Asia, which are not first world countries. So my Indian friends, you may listen to the complaints that we have over here in the first world. You may be scratching your head thinking, what are these guys complaining about? And that's the crux of the podcast. This is going to be, I'm not going to call it a gripe session, but I'm going to talk about some of the problems that we have. But when you listen to the problems that we have, my perspective on the problems that we have, they've all been carefully researched. None of them are false. This is not fake news. These are from reliable sources and experiences that I've had personally, okay? They are true problems, but I'm going to link them all together in that me being the glass half full guy, I think you're going to understand. To start with, if you don't like the way things are, be patient, because they're going to change. That's one thing about this country. We have an ebb and flow, a yin and yang. We go from the right to the left, to the right to the left, from good to bad, back to good again, depending on who you are, of course. And there's an old saying that says, as goes California, as goes the rest of the country. And that's rather true. You can say what you want about California, but it is very progressive, but it's very insightful. And generally, the way things are going in California, the country, especially in the Midwest, tends to follow a little bit afterwards with good adjustments, I might add. A lot of times when you're the leader of the pack, you're going to be the first one to step in the pile of dog poo, okay? And I think California does that a lot. As us in the Midwest come by, okay, we see it, we smell it, we don't step in it, okay? We may not be the first ones to do it, but after we do it, our way tends to be better. But that's after following their lead, to be fair. California has been in the headlines because they are so progressive. They are so far left. And I don't mean progressive in a good way. I won't even use the term liberal. There are many cities in the state of California, some would argue the whole state, but especially Los Angeles and San Francisco, are almost homes to failed states, okay? The crime, the homelessness is so out of control, there's almost no government that rules because everybody just does whatever they want. And I've always been a proponent of saying, look, People will figure it out. Will go the other way. Talk to my buddy California Dave, who lives in Los Angeles. We go through this all the time because remember, California once upon a time, that's where Richard Nixon came from. That's where Ronald Reagan came from. So not a long time ago, California was a solid red state. Not too long ago, Missouri was a solid blue state. A Republican couldn't buy a term in office in the state of Missouri in the 1970s and 80s. In the 80s, it started to change, but the 60s and 70s especially, all Democrats, all very moderate, pro-union, pro-family, pro-worker Democrats. Not so much anymore. California used to be a solid red state. Not so much anymore. But that trend is changing as well. And by the way, the sources I've gotten from this essay, NBC News, Wall Street Journal, a few other minor sources, but those are the two main sources I've used for this essay today. But if you heard what came out of California on Tuesday, is the California voters in San Francisco and Los Angeles made big-time changes at the poll on Tuesday. In fact, San Francisco voters fired their headline-grabbing reformist district attorney on Tuesday after rising crime rates proved intolerable even for the famously progressive city. Chasey Bolden, and I may be pronouncing his name wrong. I've heard it pronounced about 8 different ways. He's the son of left-wing radicals, and he was elected on a Black Lives Matter-aligned platform to reform the criminal justice system. And he faced a successful recall effort as voters grew frustrated with the perception that his office was not willing to do much about crime. And by the way, it wasn't a perception. Case in fact, they shut down a bunch of Walgreens stores and CVS stores in San Francisco because basically people would just go in and take stuff. And if you stole less than $200, the police wouldn't even come. And if they came, and if they did arrest somebody, the prosecuting attorney would not file charges. So basically, you could go into any store in San Francisco and just steal stuff, and nobody would do anything about it, just so it wasn't more than $200, or maybe it was $500. There was some figure there. So if you only stole so much, they weren't going to do anything because, by the way, these people are poor and oppressed, and they need the help. That was the way the district attorney worked in California, in San Francisco. The people, they'd had enough. Even the progressives had enough. In fact, the outcome and its lopsided margin was a rebuke as of the left as Democrats retreat from calls to defund the police. Remember that stupid thing, defund the police, in the face of national polls showing growing concerns about public safety, especially from people of color. And that's important. I had the Gray Falcon on a couple of weeks ago, and one of his biggest mantras, for those of you who listen, is all this defund the police stuff. This isn't coming from black people, because black people are the main, they're the main victims of crime. Why would they want to get rid of the police? This is from the white progressives, okay? And by the way, there's a big difference between reform the police and defund the police. Reform the police means you can't beat people over the head just because you don't like the way they're doing things. And quite often, those people are people of color. That's reform the police. Get rid of that practice. Defund the police means take all their money away and disband them and put consulars in their place. Well, that doesn't work. And that's mainly the mantra of the white progressive left. Now, more than two-thirds of the expected vote counted, Bedoin was moved from office by over 60% of the people elected to remove him from office. That's huge, okay? So California had had enough. San Francisco had had enough. And Los Angeles had had enough too. In fact, and another sign of dissatisfaction in the Democratic stronghold of L.A., which, by the way, Richard Riordan, a Republican, ran that city not too long ago. But there's an ex-Republican billionaire who's now a Democrat who will face Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass in a runoff election in November for the next mayor of California. His name is Rick Caruso, and he's a major real estate developer who joined the Democratic Party shortly before declaring his run for mayor. So he was a lifelong Republican and says, you know what, I'm a Democrat now, which is not, I mean, if you're going to survive in LA, you're not going to be a Republican. You're going to be a Democrat. That's just the way things work. Same as Missouri. You're not going to survive as a Democrat. You need to be a Republican. Anyway, he outspent his opponent, Democratic Representative Karen Bass, and he ran on the mounting frustration with homelessness and crime in the city of LA. In fact, Caruso found support in famously liberal Hollywood. Yeah, Hollywood supported this guy, from left-leaning celebrities like Katy Perry, who has performed at the DNC many times, and she's been a reliable booster. She writes big-time checks to Democrats. She supported this guy. Addressing reporters and supporters, Caruso called the outcome a great awakening, saying Los Angeles residents felt unheard and disappointed by career politicians. Our big, beautiful city needs help, Caruso added. Homelessness was by far the leading issue for voters, with 49% picking it as one of their top two issues in the University of California Institute of Government Studies / Los Angeles Times poll that was done right before the election. So homelessness and crime, again, in LA, as in San Francisco, the people have just had enough. And I knew that would happen. I mean, here's how the left progressives work. They will be very supportive of the homeless. They will be very supportive of criminals until a homeless person parks their crap outside of their business or on their front yard, or a criminal beats them in the head and steals their stuff, or breaks into their car and steals their stuff. Now it's gone far enough. That's the way the left works. And things are changing in Los Angeles. One more thing I'm going to add, and I don't like to get too political here normally, but I'm going to say something because our current president, Joe Biden, made a statement, and he's famous for his gaffes, okay? I'm going to start this off by saying, remember when that moron George Bush didn't know how to pronounce the nuclear? He'd say nuclear. What a moron. He doesn't even know how to pronounce the word. He's got his finger on the button and he can't even say the word. That George Bush. What a moron. Well, all the mass shootings we've had recently, first of all, they're a problem. And if the right were halfway smart, and they're not, and if the left were halfway smart, and they're not, they would just listen to exactly what the president said, give the president what he wants, and the problem would be solved. What does the president want? Well, I heard him say it. Joe Biden says the first thing we need to do to get rid of the mass shootings is to make illegal 300-round magazines. We don't need them. And I agree 100%. You know why I agree 100%? Because there's no such thing as a 300-round magazine. Google it. I've researched this. The only place they have 300-round magazines are in BB guns, okay? And I even talked to California Dave, who is an expert on guns. He's written white papers. That's how he made his living, advising people selling machinery that, among other things, finished the inside bores of guns. He's involved in multiple shooting clubs, etc. The guy knows a lot about guns. And he even told me there's no such thing as a 300-round magazine. He says it's an impossibility. He said maybe there's a 100-round magazine someplace, but 8 times out of 10 it's going to fail because it's going to jam. You get over 30 rounds, it's not going to work. So all the right has to do is say, look, we're going to give the president everything he wants. Starting tomorrow, 300-round magazines, illegal. Done. If you're going to be president of the United States, you can't just run your mouth saying crap that doesn't make sense. And I'll tell you why. Why is the main reason Joe Biden got elected? Look who he ran against. A guy who ran his mouth saying crap that didn't make sense. So now you win, and you run your mouth saying crap that doesn't make sense. We need to expect more from our politicians, especially the current president. I mentioned before my trip to Los Angeles. I'm sorry, my trip to Atlanta. I flew into Atlanta on Monday. I was there till Thursday, and Atlanta. Here's why I link Atlanta to LA. Atlanta is the Los Angeles of the East. Okay, it just is. It's the way it works. It's the way it rolls. Traffic in Atlanta is just as bad as traffic in LA. Now, in LA, you have bumper-to-bumper traffic, 6 lanes wide. In Atlanta, you have bumper-to-bumper traffic, but it's only 4 lanes wide. Okay, but still, it's hard to get anywhere, and the intersections are not marked as well as on the West Coast. It's hard to get around in Atlanta. I'll just say that. The traffic is horrible. The drivers are even worse. The potholes. Folks, I saw, and this was the ultimate laziness to me. There was a pothole in the middle of the street, and they didn't fix it. But what they did was they took fluorescent paint and painted a circle around it, okay? My question is, why didn't you were there doing something. Why didn't you just fill it? Okay. I mean, this thing was huge. This thing was about 1.5 feet in diameter and looked to be about 6 to 8 inches deep. So they marked it so you wouldn't run your tire into it. Why didn't they just fix it? That's poor management and laziness by the people in charge. But that's another way that Atlanta just, it sucks. The traffic is bad, but okay, I get that. There's a lot of people there. You don't fix the streets. You paint a sign around your potholes. That's okay because traffic's bad, so just walk more, okay? I went to dinner about a mile from my hotel, and normally I would walk that, okay? It's a nice walk, nice relaxing walk there. You have your meal, you walk a mile home, you walk off the meal, life is good. Couldn't walk because in most places in Atlanta, they don't have sidewalks. They just don't have sidewalks. Okay. And the streets are so busy, you can't walk on the side of the street. You can't really walk on the grass next to the street because there's mounds and hills. Okay. It's not flat. And if you kick over an anthill, those red ants will eat you alive. So it's hard to walk. I would have walked, but I couldn't because there were no sidewalks in Atlanta. I talked to you about the ring they painted around the pothole. I had to get gasoline 2 different times in Atlanta. Guess what? Both times, the gas pump didn't spit out a gasoline receipt. I got to turn my gas receipts into the boss, and the machines didn't work. One time, I went to go pick up the gas receipt inside, and there was nobody there. The door was locked. There was no attendant. And then I looked around at myself. I thought, you know what? This is a horrible neighborhood. I probably should have never even gotten gasoline here to begin with. That's why they lock the doors and don't let anybody in. And this was 11 o'clock in the morning. Okay. This was not like it was midnight. So the gas machines, the gas pumps didn't spit out gas machines. In the bathrooms at the Atlanta airport. Okay, look, we may or may not still be in a pandemic. We're either at the tail end of a pandemic or we're in an endemic. But either way, okay, if you don't want to wear a mask, that's cool. But after you use the bathroom, you need to wash your hands, right? Hey, why don't you put soap in the bathrooms? I had to go to the 5th soap dispenser in the bathroom after I used it before I found soap. Here's the news flash. That's what I did because I wanted to wash my hands with soap because I had to eat soon. It was disgusting. Not many people did. They either didn't use the water at all. They just splashed a little water, tried the soap. It didn't work, dried their hands and left. So they don't put soap in the bathrooms in the airport. When you're in that airport, you hear the mayor saying, "Welcome to Atlanta. We are the busiest, most efficient airport in the world." Busiest, maybe. Most efficient? No. Put soap in your bathroom so you can wash the feces off your hands before you shake hands and touch stuff. That's how you stop disease, folks. Maybe you wear a mask and it helps. Maybe it doesn't. Washing your hands after you've used the toilet, that's just common sense, but not in Atlanta. Lots of problems in Atlanta. They need to get their act together. I mentioned that Atlanta is like the Los Angeles of the East. You saw what they did to the politicians in Los Angeles, didn't you? Atlanta, you better pay attention. I got to Atlanta, of course, via airplane. And airplanes have changed. The airlines have changed. Because Southwest Airlines is about the only one that doesn't do this. And Southwest Airlines is about the only airline that I fly anymore because they don't pull this crap. But basically, how much does it cost to get from here to there? If you look at Southwest Airlines, who for the longest time was, the bargain airline, okay? And they're really not anymore. They're no cheaper than American or Delta or United. Kind of. They're about the same price. In fact, sometimes the legacy airlines are cheaper. And I'll fly them sometimes because their routes are better if you're flying to a hub. Okay? But once you see the price of the airplane ticket, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the legacy carriers. In fact, try to reserve, here's an example. This was out of the Wall Street Journal. Try to reserve a seat 15D on Delta Airlines nonstop flight from Atlanta to LA in mid-July, and the price tag pops up on the seat, $105 each way. That's not the price of the ticket, folks. That's the price to sit in that seat. That's on top of the ticket price. So when you add the airline ticket price to the I want to sit in this seat price, $998 round trip from LA to Atlanta. Now, the $105 price on Delta is the fee for a preferred seat on the flight. What's a preferred seat? There's no extra leg room, there's no early boarding, and no dedicated overhead bin space. Now, Delta and other major airlines, American included, deem that such ordinary economy class seats are more valuable than those in the back of the plane, so they charge more for them. Okay, so what do you get? With a straight face, they say, you get off the plane quicker. So you can go down to the baggage claim and wait a half an hour for your luggage. In other words, yeah, you get off the plane quicker, but you don't get out of the airport quicker. It's ridiculous. In fact, long a budget airline staple, seat selection fees have become widespread and are driving up the cost of flying at major U.S. airports and airlines. Free seats are often rare, and they're truly awful, like the last row near the bathroom. That's especially for the travelers who travel at the last minute. In fact, here's the case of Lisa Keeler, who's a retired California state government worker in Sacramento. She paid $27 for an aisle seat on a United Airlines flight from Denver to New York. That was back in May, for easy access to the bathroom. She found mostly middle seats among the free options when she boarded. All the free seats are terrible seats, says Mrs. Keeler. And by the way, they're not free seats. The airlines do this. Well, here's your free seat. No, it's not a free seat. You paid money to fly. It's not a free seat. You can't stand. You got to sit somewhere. It's not a free seat. It's a seat with no premium charges. So stop spinning it as a free seat. Airlines don't divulge their seat fee revenue, and the U.S. Transportation Department doesn't require them to do so. But here's a little glimpse of how it could, or how much they could be making. Southwest Airlines, which doesn't assign seats, but they do offer 2 paid options to board early and to get a better pick of seats because you're boarding early. They collected $711 million from such fees, and also incidental flight purchases like booze and that. And that was in 2019. Now these figures dipped to $359 million when the pandemic hit, but they're back up to $553 million last year. $553 million last year. And that's just for the first class extra. People do buy it. And that's just, if you don't know how Southwest Airlines works, there's 3 groups, A, B, and C, A being first, okay? I'm a preferred member because I fly so much, so I'm what they call A plus or something like that. I forget the name of it exactly. But I usually get a boarding seat. It's A something, okay? Usually it's like A35 or something like that. And the way Southwest works is you got A1 through 60, B1 through 60, C1 through 60. You rarely go to C60 because the planes aren't that big, but you know what I'm saying. I'm usually like A35, something like that, okay? That's just the seat they give me because I'm preferred. Now, if I wanted to pay extra, I could get seat A3. It's third one boarding. I could really pick any seat that I want. And they give you a drink with it too, I think, okay? Just with that service, buying drinks and the A+ seating, the preferred seating, $555 million what Southwest got. You can imagine what the legacy airliners get then. In a 2021 report, industry consultant Jay Sorensen, he's the president of IdealWorks, called seat fees an economic gift that has required little investment from airlines. In fact, the fees, which vary by route, carrier, flight date, etc., even the time when you book it, are now the airline's second biggest source of a la carte revenue after baggage fees. Yeah, Southwest doesn't charge those either. Mr. Sorensen included that the Economy Plus seats with extra legroom and other perks are a major tally for the airlines. Now, United Airlines formally introduced preferred seating in late 2018 with fees as low as $9 one way. Okay, for $9, you could sit in an exit row. That wasn't bad. Now, as of last week, the airline was charging $26 for a preferred seat, just an aisle, or $17 for a preferred window seat. That was on an Orlando to Houston flight. Of the 75 open seats on the flight, 30 were Economy Plus and 31 were marked preferred. That left 14 seats available. All but a handful of them were middle seats. A family of 4 would have had one option to sort of sit together without paying extra. On the last row, the window and middle seats were open on each side. So yeah, the family could sit together without paying extra in the last row, smelling the toilet all the way from Orlando to Houston. United Airline Chief Executive Scott Kirby introduced similar fees at U.S. Airways back in 2008. He was fond of saying charging extra for ordinary seats near the plane's front is no different than paying more to sit closer to the stage in a concert, but was criticized for the comparison. Now he uses a real estate analogy. What we're really selling on an airplane is square footage. There's only so many square feet. Sorry, son, but no matter how you spin it, you're fleecing the customer. The first thing to know is that you don't have to pay for a seat assignment on any flight, even on the budget airlines or when traveling with restricted economy tickets. Now, if you skip your seat selection, you usually get a bad seat, but not always. This summer, with all the packed planes, going through the free route usually means you're going to wedge yourself in a middle seat that's probably apart from others in your group. Now, airlines say they do best to accommodate families, and sometimes they do, families with young children, but the track records are mixed. If that sounds dreadful, pay up for a preferred seat like Mrs. Keeler did. She says she doesn't pay extra when traveling with any of her 4 children, but when she does, the costs add up quickly. So 27 times 4, yeah, what is that? $108 each way just to sit together. And maybe you don't want to sit to the next to little rugrats. Yeah, put them next to me. That's better, right? No, it's not. Passengers with elite status, like me, on American and Southwest, they're generally immune. And again, I'm not going to fly any airline unless I can help it, unless it's American or Southwest. I'm a lifetime million miler on American, and I've got the A+ on Southwest. I'm not going to fly anybody else. I'm just not, because they're going to treat me like crap. Okay, you get the extra leg room, you get the early boarding, you get the perks. Okay, that's what I want. Now, if the preferred seats fees are high, but you're purchasing a seat regardless, compare the cost of preferred seats of those in Economy Plus, which come with more leg rooms. And sometimes you even get a free drink with it. Now, they pull this crap. The airlines pull this crap all the time. Hey, you want a seat that you can actually sit in? Just pay a little bit extra, okay? And they charge a little bit extra. But when they pull this, they want you to feel sorry for them. But you know what? Remember during the pandemic when they couldn't fill the planes and we're losing money, we're losing money. Okay, so you fired all your pilots. Now they can't get the pilots to come back. And more on that later. But the airlines were crying poor, and now that things have turned, they're fleecing the customers. They're fleecing the passengers. And that's why nobody gives two shakes about the dopey airlines. I know a guy who made a bunch of money buying airline stock because airline stock goes up and down. It's so volatile. The legacy airlines especially. He buys when it's $3 a share, and then he sells it when it goes to $23 a share, and they go up and down and up and down and up and down. But the airlines, if you're going to fly, folks, fly Southwest. That's all I'm going to say. They don't charge extra. They're easy to work with. And if you can fly Southwest, you're going to get 2 free bags. If you want to pay extra to board early and sit with your family, you can do that. Or you can just say, look, they have family boarding. Family boarding boards after all the A's. So you're like the 60th person on the plane. Unless you got 12 kids, which if you got 12 kids and you're flying, take a bus. But unless you got 12 kids, you're all going to sit together on Southwest, okay? That's a big problem if you're flying. Airline seats are expensive. And I get that because fuel's expensive. All costs have gone up for everybody. But there's no need to charge $100 each way just so you can sit in a seat that you can actually stretch your legs out on. Extra $100, I should say. That is another first world problem we have with the airlines. And that's if you're flying to cities like, if you're flying from St. Louis to Atlanta, or from Orlando to Houston, or from Denver to New York City, okay? What if you want to fly someplace not so big? They fly there too. The airlines do, don't they? Well, kind of. In fact, if you want to fly someplace to a small town this summer, good luck getting there. Because with travelers buying ticket prices in droves, airlines are preparing for a surge and planning to provide seating for 11% more passengers this summer. Now, you wouldn't know it, though, if you tried to travel to some small cities because they've cut some out of the schedule. Now, a growing number of small airports have fewer flights, and some are risking losing service altogether. Why, you ask? Because the regional airlines that serve them can't hold on to pilots because they're getting snapped up by bigger carriers. Newsflash, you fired a bunch of pilots and now you want them to come back. Well, you can't have it both ways, friends. Now, there's 30 airports in the continental United States that have lost all or at least half of the departures that they had in 2019. That's according to an analysis of the scheduled data by Airline Data, Inc. Back in March, SkyWest Airlines notified airport officials that 29 cities it intended to serve ended. In fact, they cited pilot staffing imbalance. In other words, they couldn't get pilots. Nearly all those cities, SkyWest is the only commercial airline that flies. For travelers near the Sioux City, Iowa, and Jamestown, North Dakota airports, both which SkyWest is attempting to leave, the next closest airport, 80 miles away. Now, regional airlines play a major role in the U.S. air travel. In fact, they operate more than 40% of U.S. passenger flights, often flying on behalf of major airlines and helping to feed travel into the hubs of Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, etc. In other words, Republic Air, companies like that, okay, that's like they fly for American because they funnel people into Chicago, Atlanta, and Dallas. Their hubs. Well, Atlanta is Delta, but you get what I'm saying. The regional airlines get you from the little bitty cities into a big hub. Then you have to book on the regular airline to go ahead and get to where else you want to be. Now, for many small communities, flights operated by regional carriers are their only link to the broader aviation network. That's according to Regional Airline Association. About 2/3 of U.S. airports with scheduled passenger service rely exclusively on regional carriers. That includes 235 in the continental United States. There's some in Hawaii. There's a lot in Alaska. Earlier in the pandemic, fearing the years-long travel downturn, Airlines encouraged pilots to retire early, offering them packages that included partial pay and benefits. Thousands of airline pilots retired, many earlier than they planned. Travel demand, however, rebounded a whole lot quicker than the executives anticipated, and the pilot shortage that has been looming in the industry arrived sooner than expected. In fact, the share of U.S. pilots approaching mandatory retirement age of 65 has grown in recent years. That's according to data from the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. Now, finding the next generation of pilots has gotten more challenging, and you hear this a lot. Well, we can't find fill in the blank. Pilots get a lot of money, folks. But why don't they want to fly? Well, a 2013 federal rule requires that aspiring pilots fly 1,500 hours before being hired at a carrier. That adds years and tens of thousands of dollars of cost to the training process. So there's your answer. Why is it harder to get more pilots? Because becoming a pilot is harder to do. Major airlines, get this, those of you who say I can't find a good job, major airlines are planning to hire more than 10,000 pilots this year. I read that. I thought, that can't be right. I researched it. It's true. Major airlines are planning to hire more than 10,000 pilots this year. Think about that. Major airlines. That's not SkyWest. That's not Boutique Air. In fact, those people are going to have to hire more too, because that's where the major airlines are going to get many of those pilots. Okay. That's nearly double the next busiest year for pilot hiring, which was last year. Okay. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that there will be openings for 14,500 pilots a year for the next decade. I'm going to repeat that. 14,500 pilots per year for the next decade. Even I can do that math. 14,500 times 10. Friends, that's 145,000 pilots. And you say you can't find a good job? Think about it. To find new pilots, carriers such as American Airlines, United Airlines, Delta, etc., have been pulling from the ranks of their regional affiliates, which has been and they're having trouble replacing them. SkyWest and Mesa Air, they're out of Arizona, said they are seeing significantly higher rates of turnover than normal, especially among the most experienced pilots, the captains. Now, I wish I could say it was getting ready to improve, but it's not, said Matt Koskal. He's the executive vice president of Republic Airways out of Indianapolis. In fact, it's going to get worse before it gets better, according to Mr. Koskal. Some lawmakers are considering introducing legislation to raise the mandatory retirement age for pilots. Why not? 65 is the new 55, right? If you want to work, why not? Now, the squeeze is likely to continue until late next year or early 2024. That's according to SkyWest. So in other words, they're going to have this problem until 2024, big-time problems. That's another 2 years. Meanwhile, smaller airlines don't have enough employees to operate all the flights that they had planned. United has pulled out of 18 small markets, including Columbia, Missouri, and Evansville, Indiana. We're flying dramatically fewer regional jets than we were in 2019. That's according to United Chief Commercial Officer Andrew Nocella. He said that during a recent earnings call. And he also said that we don't expect to improve at all in the next few years. United has said it has 150 regional jets grounded due to lack of pilots. Mesa Airlines lost 5% of their pilots in April because they were hired away from somebody else. Now, soaring fuel prices have made it more difficult for airlines to make money on the niche routes. Also, 50-seat jets that airlines have relied on to serve small cities are being phased out as they get older, replaced with jets with 70 seats, which are more cost efficient, but that's only if you fill them up. And maybe 70 people don't want to fly to Columbia, Missouri or Jamestown, North Dakota. Some small airports used to have 2 or 3 flights a day. Now they're just down to 1. That makes it tough to get connections, meaning you have to have an overnight stay or drive 3 or 4 hours to a busier airport. Now, Wilf Costello, he's the Chief Commercial and Marketing Officer at Glambia Nutritionals, that's a cheese manufacturer in Twin Falls, Idaho, says flight reductions have been a headache for business travelers in the area. Twin Falls has had as many as 4 daily flights last fall, but now they just have one flight a daily out of Twin Falls. Now, earlier this year, he and 2 colleagues needed to fly to California, but there were only 2 seats left on that day's flights, so he had to go out a day earlier. So think about it. These guys are used to flying from podunk fill in the blank to a major city on the same day, and now they can't. Another first world problem? Depends on how you look at it. Now, he had to drive to Boise because he couldn't get a flight out. That's a 3-hour flight, okay? Or actually, Boise's 2 hours, or Salt Lake City, that's 3 hours. Williamsport, Pennsylvania, 30,000 people in Williamsport. In fact, that's where they have the Little League World Series every summer. No more commercial airline flights out of Williamsport, Pennsylvania. They just don't have any because they don't have pilots. They don't have routes. I mean, they don't have people to fly the planes. So things continue to change. In fact, some cities like Elko, Nevada, they decided to go ahead and pay SkyWest almost $1 million a year to keep up flights to Elko, because they said, look, we can't make money at this because we can't get pilots. And Elko said, look, this is more than just a minor inconvenience. We're 8 hours from the nearest airport. That would be Las Vegas. So they paid $1 million to Republic Airlines just to keep the airplanes coming in. Twin Falls, they had to work with SkyWest, pay them almost $500,000 a year just to fly. That's on top of the airline fees they get, okay? Now, communities are having to dig deeper into their pockets to hang on to the remaining services, says Bill Tomsich. He's a consultant who works with small airports, including Elko, on attracting and maintaining airline services. Once airlines leave and the TSA pulls out, he said, it can be hard to restart the flights. Now, not everyone is convinced it's worth the cost. Claudia Ortega, she's the city councilor at the Pocatello, Idaho airport, and the city of Pocatello wanted to give $800,000 a year to SkyWest to keep one flight a day flying in and out of that city. And Mrs. Ortega said, look, a large percentage of our town's population lives paycheck to paycheck, so she's not sure the city can sustain a commercial flight. Every other city councilor disagreed with her, and they voted to write the check. $800,000 a year for one flight a day. Now, after American Airlines flew its last flight from Connecticut's Tweed New Haven Airport on September 30th, the airline had no carrier for a month. Now it's the hub for Avelo Airlines, an airline that launched last year. It will fly to 14 destinations, including Wilmington, North Carolina, and West Palm Beach, Florida. So some of these cities are taking them up, but you know what? Here's the thing. If you live in a little bitty town, in fact, remember during the pandemic, everyone's saying, well, we can just move from the big city to a little bitty podunk town and just work from home until you have to fly someplace else. But you can still fly someplace else. But what you have to do is maybe leave a day early, or maybe book a week early, or stay the night someplace else to catch a connecting flight. What a hassle. What a headache. What a first world problem. The last story I'm going to talk about. Inflation's terrible, but you know where inflation has really hit hard? Lawn services. In fact, lawn care isn't only a lot more expensive this season, it's harder to find someone to cut your grass. For many landscapers, the three biggest costs to running their businesses, fuel, labor, equipment, are all surging in price. That means many are now increasing prices for the vast services they offer. The price of lawn mowing services is up 22%. Exterior power washing prices are up 20%. Tree trimming, 9%. That's year over year from May. In other words, from May of 2021 to May of 2022. That's according to Angie.com. The rapid increase in prices means thousands of customers now have to decide between shelling out more money to maintain their properties or losing time they might have spent in other ways while they were out cutting grass or fixing a broken fence. Here's one example. Evie Hatmaker. She's a new homemaker in Portland, Oregon. She had hoped to find a landscaper when she moved this spring. Her neighbors weren't optimistic. Good luck, they said. She soon realized that her and her spouse couldn't afford the hundreds of dollars a month many local landscapers were charging. So for Mrs. Hatmaker and others, The landscaping prices increased that's just one of the many ways Americans are feeling the impact of rising inflation on their monthly budgets. Sure, food, groceries, babysitters, etc. But anything related to a house or home improvement is just so expensive right now. That's what Ms. Hatmaker said. Now, behind the prices of the increase in landscaping companies are often small family-run operations with thin margins. That's according to owners of such businesses. Now, many are raising their prices. There's lots of problems. In fact, Jaime Coronado, he owns a company called Ground Guys in Cinco Rancho in Texas. Okay. He says gasoline's now $5 a gallon, and I can't afford to pay people. It's just me and my son now that we work 80 hours a week and we're barely breaking even. Clients used to pay $40 to cut the grass, realized he was losing $17 every time he cut a lawn. So he had to fire most of his help, and him and his sons are doing it himself. $1,000 a month on gas, and he loses money anytime a worker sits in his truck, so he can't hire folks. Now, Mr. Coronado starts his workers at $15 an hour, saying, look, it's hard work pushing a lawnmower during hot conditions in Texas, which is true. But it's hard to make money. Here in St. Louis, a guy named Kevin Lang, he's been maintaining lawns on the same street he grew up on since grade school, a young guy. He raised his rates by $5 across the board at the beginning of the year and now is considering still another increase. I knocked on the door of a young single mom today and had to say, hey, I told you at the beginning of the year I wasn't going to raise my prices, but gas has gone up, so I have no choice. When he came up with the prices for his clients a few years ago, he explained gas was $2 a gallon. Now it's $4.65. Actually, in St. Louis, it's now $4.85, but this article is about a week old. Okay, a belt for a lawnmower went from $60 to $120. Okay, so the result is a yard he would have priced at $35 before the pandemic is now $45 to $50. That's what it costs to cut grass. Okay, but what do you do for the people who can't hardly afford it? What do you do with those people? First world problem. Now, there is my essay on all the troubles we have nowadays, and there's so many of them. Look at the problems that we have. When we go to Atlanta, they don't have soap in the bathroom. You got to watch out for the potholes. You have to drive to dinner because they don't have sidewalks. You have to go ahead and find another way to get your gas receipt to turn into the boss. If you're flying on an airline, to get on the airplane, you might have to sit in a middle seat or pay extra. If you want to go from a tiny little town that you decide to move to because you didn't want to be in the big city anymore, you may have to take an inconvenient flight. And maybe you have to book that sooner than the same day. And cutting the grass, having somebody cut your grass, my gosh, the price has gone up. Think about all this stuff that I just said. All these horrible, horrible problems that we have that just make us just want to cry alligator tears and say, oh, poor me, poor me. I might have to find a different way to get my tax receipt. I might have to sit in traffic for 15 minutes to get to dinner if I'm going to be in Atlanta. Okay. I might have to sit in a cramped seat when I fly on an airline. I'm living in paradise in a small town, and I might have to fly out of that city a day earlier than I wanted to, the 3 times a year that I travel. And you know what? Prices have gotten so high, I might have to even cut my own grass. My God, I might have to cut my own grass. See what I'm saying here? First world problems. Any of you folks listening to the sound of my voice, listening to this podcast, please, dear listeners, especially if you live in the first world, these are the problems we're living with. There's no war in this country. You've got food on the table. In fact, look down at your belt. You probably have too much food on the table, truth be told. You're sitting in your air-conditioned house that's far bigger than what you need. Think about how many people live in this house and how many square feet you have. You may have to drive your car instead of walk if you live in Atlanta because they don't have any sidewalks. But you have a car or 2 or 3 or 4. And you know what? It's not going to hurt you to cut your own grass. Once again, look down at your waistline. It could probably help yourself to cut your own grass. Do a little bit of exercise. Take a little bit of pride in what you're doing. These are the problems that we have, friends. And in the big scheme of things, not only are all these problems fixable, not only are they things we can live with, things we can change with very few problems, but let's be real honest. Let's say none of these problems ever get fixed. If this is as bad as it gets, how bad is it? If you're honest, I think you'll agree with me that things aren't that bad. And especially if you listen to the first part of the podcast, things got horrible in Los Angeles and San Francisco. And the people said, enough. And they're electing people who are going to change that mess. First world problems, people. That's all we have in this country is first world problems. Well, that's it. I'm done. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Thank you for your support. Thank you for the emails that I get from each and every one of you. Well, not each and every one of you, but many of you. How's that? I do answer all my emails. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. Send me your emails. I do like to correspond with the dear listeners, and I do answer all my emails. Pick up the James Strong Show podcast wherever you get podcasts. Do me a favor. Share it on social media. Let other people listen to it. Share the fun. Share the love. It grows the podcast. Well, that's it. That's all I got today. Have a good weekend. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.